So in example 2, let's go through some problems using radians. Letter A, we have the cosine of 2 pi over 3. So let's set up our quadrant. And now if we're dealing with a denominator of 3, we're going to label both sides of the x-axis. So we can think of this as 0 or 2 pi. And we're going to change 2 pi in terms of thirds, which would be 6 pi over 3. And then we're going to change pi in terms of thirds, which is 3 pi over 3. And these two markings, 6 pi over 3, or 3 I should say markings, 6 pi over 3, 0, and 3 pi over 3 are going to help us determine which quadrant we are in. 2 pi over 3 is going to be one right before 3 pi over 3, which tells us that our triangle will be in the second quadrant. Here is 2 pi over 3. And then we're going to draw in our triangle. So here's our perpendicular with our reference angle of pi over 3. Now if our reference angle is pi over 3, we're going to think of that as our 60-degree angle. So it's very important that you know your three conversions. So let's take a second and look at that. So we want to know pi over 3 is the same as 60 degrees. Pi over 6 is the same as 30 degrees. And pi over 4 is the same as 45 degrees. And that's going to help us get through our triangles. So if that's 60, then we know the up angle is 30. And if we're looking for the cosine, we're looking for the x, which is across from the 30 degrees. So our answer would be negative 1/2. So the only difference today versus the degree day is that we have to look at it in terms of radians first. Let's take a look at letter B. We have the sine of 3 pi over 4. So let's set up our axes and let's label everything. Again, this would be 0. In terms of force, this would be 4 pi over 4. And 2 pi is the same as 8 pi over 4. So if I think about 1 more than 0 would be pi over 4. 1 less than 8 would be 7 pi over 4. 1 more than 4 is 5 pi over 4, and 1 less is 3 pi over 4, telling me that my angle is going to be in quadrant number 2. Since I'm dealing with a reference angle of pi over 4, this angle inside is going to be 45 degrees. And since I'm looking for the sine, I want the y, which is across from a 45-degree angle. So my answer here is going to be square root of 2 over 2. Let's look at letter C. Letter C, we have the tangent of 7 pi over 6. So let's get our triangle drawn. Label our x-axis. So we have 0. This would be the same as 6 pi over 6. And 2 pi would be the same as 12 pi over 6. And if I'm looking for 7 pi over 6, it's going to be 1 more than 6 pi over 6. Which is going to come this direction, and I'd be in quadrant number 3. Drawing in my triangle, since I have pi over 6's that I'm dealing with, my reference angle is going to be 30 degrees. So 30 here and 60 here. Meaning this side is negative square root of 3 over 2, and across from my 30 is negative 1/2. And if I'm looking for the tangent, I am looking for the y divided by the x. So my y is negative 1/2, and I'm dividing that by negative square root of 3 over 2. Changing division to multiplication, I get negative 1/2 times negative 2 over the square root of 3. So this is going to cancel here and here. A negative times a negative is a positive, so I get 1 over the square root of 3. And then if I rationalize it by multiplying by the square root of 3 over itself, I end up with my answer, of square root of 3 over 3. And let's do one more, letter D. So I have the cosecant of 5 pi over 3. So if I draw it in and label my sides, here's 3 pi over 3. this is 0 or 6 pi over 3. And I'm thinking 5 pi over 3, well 5 pi over 3 is going to be 1 less than 6 pi over 3, so right before 6 pi over 3, bringing me in the fourth quadrant. If I'm dealing with pi over 3s, my reference angle here would be 60 degrees. And I want the cosecant, which is the reciprocal of the sine. The sine is our y, which if I label this is negative square root of 3 over 2. So the cosecant is going to be the reciprocal, which would be negative 2 over the square root of 3. And then I need to rationalize it by multiplying by the square root of 3 over itself, giving me an answer of negative 2 square root of 3 over 3 as my answer. If you have questions, let me know.